Good day, everyone. So, today's story is written by Bram Stoker, who is the author of Dracula, that cult vampire classic, which most of you have read most probably in your early teens and was an introduction to horror for you. However, this story is called The Judge's House, and it is very creepy because of the atmosphere it's set in. And in my opinion, if this is what Bram Stoker could have accomplished, then it puts Dracula into a very bad light. I was not impressed with Dracula at all. I expected a lot of things from the book, reading it when I was 13, 14 years old, and unfortunately, it did not live up to those expectations. However, this story is not like that. So, onward. Malcolm Malcolmson is our protagonist. He is a man who is studying mathematics. And because his exam is almost upon him, he wishes to go somewhere where he does not feel disturbed. He does not want to stay at a friend's place. He does not want to stay with a friend of a friend. He wants complete solitude. And so he pulls out a map and puts his finger on an isolated spot called Benchurch, and then makes a preparation and takes a journey down to Benchurch, where he puts up at the Good Traveller Inn. And then he starts to look for lodgings because he plans to be here for at least a month and a half. So he starts to look for lodgings and he goes to the post office and talks to brokers there. And he is directed to the palatial house that lies on a hill, which is called the Judge's House. But when he comes back from the broker with the deed to the house in his pocket and 3 months' rent paid, and the keys to the house also in his pocket, the landlady of the Good Traveller says, "Dear sir, you're not considering, going and living in the judge's house, are you? Because if you are, then I will be forced to warn you that you're not doing the right thing, and I will be worried about you." So Malcolmson shouts this off as a very stupid warning and finds a housekeeper called Mrs. Dempster. Mrs. Dempster comes every day to cook for him and clean the house for him, and their agreement is such that she will go away in the evening because she lives in a charity lodging. So if she fails to show up, then the bed that is reserved for her is given to some other more deserving soul. And now we have talked about his activities during the day. Let us talk about his activities during the night. During the night, our student is very studious. He makes pots of tea and he starts to write and solve problems. It is during one such night when he is solving permutations and combinations that he notices that the rats in the house are making a very, very, very loud noise. And he wonders how it is that he didn't notice it before. Maybe he was too engrossed in his work. But the rats are seriously going at it, hammer and nail. And suddenly, as he starts to look around the room, he sees that there is this one very large rat which comes down the bell pull rope and sits in a chair and glares at him with sheer hatred in its eyes. And so he picks up a book and he hurls it at the rat. And of course, the book wasn't well aimed. So the rat calmly jumps aside and the book misses it. The next night, the same thing happens. He studies, and as he is studying, the rats kick up a cacophony, and this large rat comes down the bell pull rope and he sits in that high backed chair and glares at our protagonist Malcolmson. Now Malcolmson gets unnerved and this time he throws two books at the rat, and the second one does make contact. So with an angry squeak, the rat climbs the wall and disappears behind a painting. So the next morning, when Mrs. Dempster arrives, our protagonist says, "Mrs. Dempster, I want you to clean the paintings in the room that I sit and study in. I want to know whose painting it is that the rat disappears behind." Very good. And then he goes out for his normal morning walk with a volume of integration under his belt. He comes back from the walk. Mrs. Dempster has taken her leave, and he sees this tremendously dangerous looking judge glaring back at him from a portrait. The judge is robed in scarlet with a wig, like they did in the olden days. And the expression in the judge's eyes is the same as the expression of the on the rat's eyes. So now our protagonist starts to feel a little wary, not weary, wary, and he does feel a little afraid. He decides he will go to the Good Traveller for a small drink, and having decided thus, he leaves the house and he goes to the Good Traveller. While he is at the Good Traveller, the landlady, Mrs. Bittern, has called for a doctor called Dr. Thornhill. Dr. Thornhill talks to Malcolmson and says that you must stop taking that strong tea you take every night. It is doing you harm. Otherwise, you are the picture of health. And then, as discussions go on, he keeps telling them what is happening in that house. He tells them of this rat. And Mrs. Witham, she starts to scream, and ultimately, she has to be given a strong brandy and soda to get her back on her feet. And by the by, Malcolmson takes his leave. It is getting on to be night, and he makes his way back to the house and sits down to study once again. But this time, something even more sinister happens. This time, there is no rat. This time, sitting in the high back chair is the judge himself, with that same expression as in the painting in his eyes. He sits in the chair and he glares at Malcolmson, as if to say, "How dare you stay in my house?" And then the judge gets up, and Malcolmson staggers back in fear. And the judge holds on to the rope, and Malcolmson notices that the rope has been gnawed through, so the judge pulls the rope gently, and it detaches itself from the bell, and it comes into his hands. And the judge takes one end of the rope and knots it into a noose. And having made his noose, prepares to hurl it at Malcolmson. But the first time it misses because Malcolmson is able to evade it. The second time also it misses because Malcolmson evades it. This kind of game goes on and on for a little while. Many a time the rope is tossed at Malcolmson, and many a time the rope misses. So ultimately, the judge walks towards Malcolmson with a sinister threat, and he puts the noose around Malcolmson's neck, and Malcolmson is not able to move. It is as if some magical force is holding him into that uh, position. And then the judge proceeds to tie the rope back onto the bell and puts Malcolmson on a chair and then kicks the chair away, thereby making Malcolmson hang from the bell. Thus done, the judge disappears back into the portrait. And as Malcolmson dies, the bell starts to ring. And the bell is a large bell. The bell is a very large bell. So it just goes on and on ringing and ringing and ringing. And the next morning, when a search party arrives at the house, led by Dr. Thornhill and Mrs. Witham and Mrs. Dempster, they find the body of our student Malcolmson hanging from the bell rope. They also find that there is a very satisfying yet sinister smile on the face of our judge. And that was The Judge's House, written by Bram Stoker. Now, this story was recommended to me by my cousin, Narayani Mitra, who is on Instagram. She's just suddenly started an Instagram ID. I will be linking that ID in the Instagram comments. Please go check her stuff out. She's a very talented artist. She deals with all kinds of sketches, and she's currently working on a tattoo for a friend of mine. She's illustrating a novel, so she dabbles very much in the arts of a different variety. I can vouch for her. I've seen her drawings. She's extremely good, and as we all say, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. So once I have linked her profile in my Instagram, you can go over and take a look at it. And if you like what you see, spread the word. That is all I've got for you today. So this is the Binge Master signing off. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead. And this is The Judge's House by Bram Stoker. Thank you for listening.